episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SGS Nation? You are not seeing things. Phil did not suddenly drop a few pounds and go bald. He does have a goatee, but pinch hitting for Phil Waters. Literally 90 seconds ago. By the way, this is Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. It's not hyperbole. It's not exaggeration. We do it day in, day out. Got the best team, the COE, Space Coast on the West Coast, Steve Cohen, who's about to go to a Michigan football game tomorrow, and, of course, the mods, who we couldn't do this without. But about 90 seconds ago, before going on air, I got a text from Phil Waters, America's most respected detective. All his stuff went down on the big island of Hawaii. No internet. His cell phone service is out. So, although it's curious, Scott Duffy, being the investigator, how was he able to get in touch with us? That's very curious.
Yep, selective down.
Yeah, I'm starting to think like you, Scott Duffy. So, anyway, Tommy Scoville, I don't know if you've ever met Scott Duffy. Duffy, Tommy Scoville. Tommy, he grew up. He was pretty well off. He grew up in New Hampshire, the story goes, and he was a professional skier, Scott Duffy, and then he got injured and he got hooked on drugs, and that led to bank robberies. And ironically, Scott Duffy was going after bank robbers. So you guys have something in common. But now Scott Duffy has the lifeboat. He helps people with sobriety. And what's the new one, Tommy? Cults and Crims. But I immediately thought of Tommy Scoville because today we're going to be talking about Cuff Daddy, as Nancy Grace calls him. Once Puff Daddy, now just Diddy, once P. Diddy. So we're going to get into that in a minute. Tommy Scoville, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Fridays, but they're goofy, they're weird, they're not the typical show. So I got to start with Scott Duffy here. Love Tommy and the Duffster. By the way, do you guys know the story of Wally Pip, either of you?
No.
Wally Pip?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, so Wally Pip was the first baseman for the New York Yankees before Lou Gehrig, and he got sick one day, and then Lou Gehrig took over and basically broke the major league record for most games I think ever played in a row. So Phil Waters could be Wally Pip. Tommy Scoville could be Lou Gehrig. Hopefully he doesn't die of Lou Gehrig's disease. That's the reason I bring this up. Phil, you snooze, you loot. No, I love you, Phil. I would never do that to you. But Scott Duffy, I got to tell you, we're not supposed to be here today because I'm supposed to be covering the Donna Adelson trial. Oh, look, this is fascinating. Francis O'Reilly says puff means brothel in German. Who knew? Is Phil running out in the Ferrari? I don't know. But so Tommy and by the way, we go a little long here, Tommy. Whenever you got to bounce, you just do your thing. But
gotcha.
I was supposed to be covering Donna Adelson, and obviously that trial imploded. We're doing a bunch of very kind of targeted shows on that next week, related to the bar, related to appeals, related to what the new lawyers can say, all separate shows. So COE is going to load all that in, and you'll see it ahead of you. But one of the interesting things, Scott Duffy, is there's a witness who's been called in every trial. I don't know how familiar you are, but when after this murder for hire plot, and after the gang member and the other bad guy were imprisoned, the FBI set up a bump on Donna Adelson, an undercover FBI agent, and I become friends with him, Scott Duffy, and he met myself, Tim Jansen, Katie Kool-Lady, Steve Cohen for dinner in Tallahassee. And Scott Duffy, I never realized, like, number one, you have to go to undercover school. I did not know that. And he's one of kind of a select few. He teaches, but he was really like on the front lines of getting the bad guys, you know, basically going in. He was telling us a crazy story about, you know, he is of Latin American descent, so he speaks Espanol perfectly. But he at one point had to go and pretend he was Colombian or the other way around or some, and he had to get the accent right. And he was telling us like the intricacies. My bottom line question, Scott Duffy, how hard a job is that, man? They're really putting. He doesn't carry a gun a lot of times. Like he's putting his life on the line, Scott.
Yeah, the undercovers and the undercover school, that is, well, I'm going to say they're all the real deal, but I've gotten to know some of the undercovers that had worked in some of my cases. So like anything else, an FBI agent puts out a request. They're like, tell us everything that person should look like, and then we'll canvas. And then if somebody who's not in the unit, we'll figure something out. So that's typically the way an undercover agent gets introduced into a case anywhere where an FBI agent is needed to play an undercover role. So the school, I don't know much about it, but I know it's a grueling school, as well as it should be. It tests your makeup, your psychological makeup, and everything else that goes with it. And then, of course, all the errors of our previous agents who might have fallen through the cracks by not being assisted, helped, watched, monitored, because sometimes you can go deep into undercover and forget that that's just a role, not your life. So I got to know Joe Pistone, another great.
He was, by the way, he was talking about Joe Pistone. Joe Pistone infiltrated the New York mob, and he was saying that Joe Pistone is one of his idols, and it was surreal because eventually Joe Pistone became his teacher. And it was amazing. He said, "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt."
And that's what they do. Just like Oscar, they bring these guys back because some very successful people. And then Joe Pistone, of course, was an undercover agent before the undercover school was in existence, and then of course helped create the school and fine tune it to what it is today. And things happen. For example, laws take place. The undercover has to know the laws, has to know their boundaries. A lot goes into it on top of trying to figure out the role. But a couple undercover agents I've had deployed in my cases were just amazing people to get to know, but how they're able to get into a situation and work their magic is amazing. So,
by the way, shout out to Shadrick Nobles of I guess Adelson infamy. He's in the show. He's telling us that he told us, or forget who he just said. I think someone was already calling the whole Diddy thing a long time ago. From Rachel, show idea. You can lawyer, and I've been talking. He's coming back on the show, and he's actually so kind. He's going to send me some swag, and then I'm going to do something with lawyer, so don't you worry, lawyer, and STS. We are in close contact. I'm a big fan of his, and what he's doing with his channel is amazing. So kudos to him. Guy, not jealous in the least. He's gone from like 150,000 subs to 400 and something. Guy's blowing up, and he deserves it. He's a good dude. He's smart, and he breaks things down really well. It doesn't bother me at all. Not at all. Anyway, so moving on. I won't be thinking about it or obsessing about it all weekend now. Moving on. Tommy Scoville. Let's try not to get demonetized tonight.
Sure.
Be upset with that, but S happens. You've been into this Diddy story for quite some time. What drew you to it?
It seemed to me right from the start that there were a lot of parallels between this and the Epstein case. That this seemed like, as opposed to just a freak that wanted to, to partake in some weird sexual stuff. A lot of cameras, a lot of people that were seeming to be building a nice library of dirt on a lot of people. And his rise to power and his rise to fame and glory came way too fast. And it made me start looking at, how this guy got as big as he did, as fast as he did. And I think the government is onto it, right? This is, what they're saying is that Combs Entertainment is a crime organization and has been basically from Jump Street. At least that's my reading of this. So I think that that's what fascinated me about this, is just that this was never about anything other than this guy, breaking the law.
But he's been around as long as I can remember. And you and I, Tommy, and Scott are pretty much the same age. I'm not going to throw us under the bus, but like mid-50s. Actually, Tommy, I'm not sure if I think you're around our age. But
Close enough.
Close enough. So, but I mean, hasn't Diddy been around since like the late 90s?
Early 90s is when he really started to make moves. Was in the early 90s.
So what do you mean by the fact that he got like too big too fast? Because I feel like he's been at it a really long time.
Yeah, but he left. So he left Uptown Records, and this is by his own. There are videos out there in his own voice talking about this, where he says he was fired from Uptown Records and was a millionaire about 45 minutes later, and then from there. A decade is a long time to build a career, but to build what he's built, with Sean John and with the liquor company, with all of the other things he's done, I think a lot of people look at this guy as a music producer, but there was a booze tie-in for a very large and prosperous alcohol company. There was his own TV network. I mean, this guy really had his hands in an awful lot of stuff, but it always keeps coming back to the fact that people who seem to get in his way meet untimely ends, right? Or they just really happily get out of the way. And I think that gets back to the fact that you go to a Diddy party and you never know what's going to be on tape at the end of it. These parties were infamous. It's amazing to me the number of celebrities that have come out in the last, say, week and a half to say, been to a bunch of Diddy parties, but I left really, really early, right? And I never saw any of that. And I think that the tie-in is similar to Epstein, where we're going to see a lot of really famous people. I saw some shorts today of him standing with former presidents, and they're going to smut a lot of people up because this guy really did have quite a reach. There were royals at his parties that went there continuously. The parallels with Epstein are really similar. It just seems to be a younger class of people, and as opposed to being all sort of politically minded individuals, these are a lot of people that had a hand more in the entertainment industry. But in both cases, it's somebody that used sex, and very often sex that was being recorded as a way to move up the ranks really, really quickly.
Yes, this is fascinating. And Tommy, again, the perfect guest, usually for anything, but especially for this. Misdemeanor OG. Diddy's Tommy, I'll have you respond to this one. Diddy's father was a huge, nasty, evil gangster in NYC, helped burn people alive. Do you know, is this true? Because sometimes, it's tough to get that. You can get out of the hood, but sometimes it's tough to take the hood out of the person, I guess.
This one happens to be true. His dad was an enforcer for a gentleman by the name of Frank Lucas. And if you watched, there was a movie, I believe Denzel Washington played the Frank Lucas role. He was a guy that moved an awful lot of that opiate that's, starts with an H. And if you say this early in the show, we're going to get demonetized. But he was moving an awful lot of H in the early 70s, right after the boys came back from Vietnam. And his father was an enforcer for him. And the stories are pretty disgusting, some of the stuff that his dad was doing. However, his dad, died of natural causes in that line of work. He was murdered when Diddy was 2 years old. So he wasn't much of an influence other than maybe reputation. He wasn't there to help raise him in any way.
Yeah, this is already fascinating to me. So Scott Duffy, we got both sides of this really covered well. You and I talked about that. I think we talked about it on the show. I think it was back in March. They raided his homes in LA and Miami simultaneously. And I think I asked you then, I said, hey, Scott, like what, they didn't arrest him. What's going on? So I think it come to this. And you said, trust me, they're not raiding those houses for no good reason. Something's coming to this. It came of it. Scott Duffy, when they went in there, what happened in these following months up until the arrest?
Yeah. And I've never known, I can tell you this, I've never done a search warrant that didn't result in some sort of an arrest. your search warrant affidavit and your arrest warrant affidavit are very similar. But not always do they come at the same time. It's nice when they do, when you can search a house at the same time you're arresting the subject of your case. But I take it that they had enough to search, plenty probable cause, that same probable cause used to put whatever they could into an arrest warrant developing over the last few months. Not to mention, if I believe he was indicted. So an indictment is somewhat of a timely, typically you can meet once a month, and that grand jury panel is going to meet, and you're going to have however many witnesses testify, both law enforcement witnesses who could be victims, whatever it is, whoever can offer pieces of evidence against Diddy. So you might have had in that search warrant, let's just say they uncovered 100 people, 1,000 people, however many people that they didn't know about or were wondering. Now you developed a whole new witness base. If you anything with regards to, as I know through his digital media, and then of course all through his financials, you then have to take all that from the search warrant and analyze it and really go through it painstakingly. So this is not very long after that search. And of course, everybody's wondering because, it was such a big deal. But yeah, the feds don't go in, do a search warrant, and then let a case die.
Yeah. You heard Scott Duffy say he's never executed a search warrant without an arrest. And I guess they're still batting 1,000, sort of like Shohei Ohtani. Olive Green here. Tommy, are you aware of this? I'm learning. I knew I would learn stuff. Are you aware of the cartel member who sued Diddy for $666,000? What a number there. We know what that means. It was thrown out, but it's not a good look that a convicted cartel member accuses you of requesting procurement of minors. I like the way you said that, Olive Green.
Right. Perfect timing too.
Beautiful. So yeah.
I'm not aware of that. I know that there was there are people in prison that have taken to suing Diddy. There was a guy named Cardell Smith, I think his name was Cardell Lewis, something like that sued for $100 million and actually got a default judgment in his favor. And the judge was really angry that Diddy didn't show up, thought he had blown off the paperwork, and said he wanted $10 million a month for 10 months to have it paid off. That got vacated yesterday. They went back into court and found out that it was improperly served. Diddy didn't know this was happening, so that got tossed out. I know there's a lot of people taking shots at him. There's a lot of lawsuits that have been coming out, and I think it's fascinating when they kick those doors in on the 25th. When they kick two doors in at the same time. I figured it was to try to make sure that nothing gets destroyed, right? But I think that they let Diddy. I think they may have let him stay out so that he could hang himself, because instantly after those doors got kicked in, he started contacting every single person on those lists and started saying things like, hey, you make sure you tell them everything was consensual because you're going to be taken care of and life is going to be good. And that came out at the hearing about the bail. The reason he's not getting bail is not because they're afraid he's going to run. It's because they're afraid he's going to really go to town on that witness list, because he showed a lot of that in the months from the time they kicked the doors in until the time they arrested him. He was doing everything he could to interfere with everybody on that list.
This is also for Tommy here, and then we'll get into kind of the details of the week, and Tommy will continue to sprinkle in his bottomless knowledge about this case. From Rachel, is this on the same level as R. Kelly? I don't know much about either, to be honest, but I would say that this seems a much more severe. Tommy?
It is much more severe. The number of victims, the victim list with Diddy is both male and female, and not necessarily having been charged yet, because I didn't find anything in the indictment to mention people underage. But we know there are lawsuits from people that were underage who got transported from California to Atlanta and were SA'd during that process. So there are some similarities between these two cases. But I think that in the case of R. Kelly, it may have been about sex. I think R. Kelly had a real thing for young women, and that was his get down. And I think for Diddy, this isn't about sex. I think for Diddy, this is about power, that nobody became a star under him unless they performed something for him, so to speak. And I think it was because of the fact that it seems to be men, women, and kids. It seems to him that it's more about power and control, in my opinion, right?
You know, Tommy, this is fascinating, and I'll tell you why. My beloved mother, everyone knows, good old Carm, right over here. She's not feeling well. She's got a cough. She's fine. She just needs cough meds. But I did take her to urgent care, and I began to film her on the way in, to which she didn't realize I was recording, and she dropped an F-bomb, told me to F off, leave her alone. I was debating posting that. Still might post it, depending on how she treats me over the weekend. But the point is, Carm has heard everything and then some in her life, a licensed therapist. So I was relaying some of what you were telling me, not in such graphic detail.
Sure.
She looked at me and she said, this is not about sex. Exactly what you just said. She said, this is a power trip by this guy seeking power. So that's fascinating to me. And Tommy, before I get back to Scott, in your opinion, are we going to see some really big names come out of this potentially? People who we will be stunned to hear about that had either participated in these freak offs or actually participated with Diddy in lewd acts.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know exactly. It's going to happen. I don't know how many people are going to be shocked at some of the names because but he doesn't have any other play, right? I think that when he sits down with his attorney, I have had the misfortune of having the federal government prosecute me on more than one occasion, and they're really good at it. I mean, I don't care how much money you got, and I don't care how well you think you've prepared. It's like he said, when they kicked those doors in, they had enough of a case to destroy that guy, and it's just gotten a hell of a lot better since.
By the way, Tim Jansen said he was a federal prosecutor. They have a 98% conviction rate. So there you go. Diddy might be a top 1%er, but he ain't going to be a top 2%er when it comes to not being convicted. Scott Duffy from Courtney H. Man, this is Phil Waters, man. Might be calling you Wally Pipp soon. Can Daddy's kids, Diddy's, not Daddy's, sorry, that was a Freudian slip by my part. Scott Duffy, can Diddy's kids be forced to testify against him? They were present at the searches. Some of his kids are adults. Can they subpoena them and say, yeah, you got to testify?
They can always be subpoenaed, at least to bring them in and kind of see what they're going to say, how they're going to say it. You can always get somebody in front of you, but if it also depends what they have that could be self-incriminating. So if they, then the federal government is going to tell them you're a target, and so you better come in sooner than later, and we'll provide an attorney for you if you need it. But absolutely, family members are often used and provide good information, even when they don't realize they're providing good information. I would just say the only one I think still to this day, unless they waive, is a spouse.
Scott Duffy, we often joke on Fridays that nothing surprises you or Phil Waters, guys kind of jaded by your profession. Did it surprise you to read that they confiscated 1,000 bottles of lube from Diddy's home? Don't know if I just got demonetized. Scott Duffy, your brow is furrowed. Or does it surprise you to have read that? That's an enormous amount of lube.
Especially with what this case is all about. No, it sounds like it is this is a major event. This is a major case, and then as Tommy is saying, he's not the only one that's going to be brought in for this.
Scott, let me ask you another question. On that cell phone that's near you somewhere, do you have numbers in there, people that you call who get you the inside scoop on this?
Yeah.
You do.
Oh, could be.
Do you? do you?
Probably not on this one, especially because it's an HSI case. If it was an FBI case, it'd be a different story.
Oh, there you go. And here's the $64 million question. I mean, Scott Duffy, Donna Adelson, the trial I was supposed to be at, she tried to take off to Vietnam, one-way ticket. She had to buy a plane ticket. Diddy's got a jet. Why didn't he take off? What do you think the psychology is there? Why did he stick around?
I think Tommy alluded to it with regards to, and I was going to say also with regards to any type of these, sexual cases, whether it be somebody who's committing the rape or in this case causing others, it is often about power, and then sex is just the cherry on top. It is the bonus. But power is the absolute drive. Yeah, what was the question again?
I don't even know. Let's move on to this.
Why didn't he run? I think is the
why didn't he run?
Great.
So
thanks, Tommy.
It's a power thing. It's come get me. I dare you. And so it's like this, and where is he going to go? The government is far-reaching. I think in the case where she had a one-way ticket, which is great. The government has already shown that you can show if you're fleeing, that is indicative of guilt. And so in this case, he's sitting around doing whatever, but he's as Tommy alluded to, he's calling witnesses, interfering with witnesses, pressuring, doing whatever, intimidating witnesses. So he it probably goes to the psychology of of an individual that says I can beat the government, and it's a power trip. I can stand here. I have enough power, money, fame to change the outcome.
But by the way, I haven't even gotten to the first bit of my notes on this. I have a lot of notes, so this is we might be doing. Usually, Tom, we do a lot of like other true crime stories. We'll get to them, in super quick fashion at the end. But from Spike Z here, back to Tommy, Rodney Jones. Now, I've heard this name. Sued Diddy for SA. His videographer and producer, Rodney Jones. Rodney. So tell us about this Rodney Jones guy, Rojo, as I will call him.
Rojo. Yeah, he was hired as a producer on Diddy's most recent album, and he was kind of pulling double duty, which is going to be really interesting in the case because he was also hired sort of as a videographer to document everything going on in Diddy's life during the making of the Love album. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to see in this case took place during the making of the Love album. And when he sued for $30 million, he handed over a bunch of video, audio, apparently even some paperwork. He really went out of his way to make sure that he had this buttoned up before the lawsuit started. And I think that his case and Cassie Ventura's case are the backbone of this entire trial. You notice that they're referring to them as freak offs. These are a lot of things that came directly out of those lawsuits. So, and just quickly on the why he didn't run thing, right after the bust went down, or the raids went down, there was a time when that jet ended up fueled up in Florida. Mm-hmm. And as he was heading toward it, he met a lot of guys from the government. Nothing that cat was going to do, he was going to get away with doing. So his attorney talked him into handing over his passport. And everywhere he went after the raids, after that first attempt, I think everywhere he went, he told him where he was going and tried to look like he was a real upstanding cat from that point on.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's Cassie Ventura's ex-girlfriend, and a lot of people say the indictment reads like her lawsuit, and, he made that apology. I think that apology came after the raids, and that was kind of a pathetic apology, but we'll get back to that. Irene Kalexko, here's one big name. Justin Bieber wrote a song about Diddy's parties. I'm not a music guy, so I had no clue. I shudder to think what he's seen and experienced. You got to remember, Justin Bieber was, I think, 15 when he rose to fame. I think just off of YouTube. He was a Canadian, a little, boy in Canada, amazing talent. Tommy, this is going to be, this going to be the very sad, I guess, collateral damage here. Do you think tonight someone like Justin Bieber is super stressed out, not knowing what could come out about him? I'm not saying he's culpable in any way, but I'm just saying, like, you know, he is a public figure, and whatever sorts of things come out, they could destroy a career potentially.
Yeah, he's been really putting up with an awful lot since the lawsuit broke, because there's a lot of video of him and Diddy standing together talking, and it has not aged well. When you look at this video in hindsight, the kid looks terrified, and it's video where Diddy says stuff like, "How come you don't call me anymore? I thought we were friends." And you can watch Bieber he's recoiling. It's a terrible thing. And there's also a very uncomfortable clip of film of him in a nightclub with a pretty famous athlete that played for the Giants, Odell Beckham. I'm not going to get into it because you'll get demonetized. Yeah. But if you watch that video, it looks like Justin might have just finished doing something that you wouldn't want anyone to ever know that you did to a dude, especially if it happens to be on film. So I think a lot of the people.
And by the way, that was like in a public setting with other people.
It was
around.
In a nightclub. Yeah, it was in a nightclub with people sort of watching, and it's disturbing.
That's really, that's Googleable, if I may use that as a verb. We're not going to Google that here, but Tommy, is this accurate? Diddy is Epstein times 10. Mainstream media hasn't even scratched the surface.
I tend to agree that there's going to be a lot more that comes out of this, but that just might be because we didn't really, I don't know that we really saw all of the stuff that came out on Epstein. There's an awful lot of victims in this. It seems like just about anybody that this guy made famous, right, is a victim. They had to choose, to make a deal with the devil in order to become famous. So it's pretty nasty.
Yeah. So Scott Duffy, he's got this attorney whose name I have somewhere further down in my notes, but a bunch of things for Scott. This is the first one. Is stuff here going to be sealed since there's going to be a lot of famous people, or are we going to start to see people that the federal government wants to speak to or subpoena as possible witnesses?
Yeah. So typically the government goes to great lengths to protect its witnesses. So, that the bad guys know who their witnesses are for the most part, and then start trying to go down and beat the government getting a hold of these witnesses. But yeah, they'll use for any true victims, they'll use initials, or victim number 1, number 2, et cetera, et cetera. They'll hold on to them. They do not have to be released anytime soon. And then in some cases, the cases that I have worked where, if the government is doing everything in their power to protect the victims who turn into good witnesses, that could become part of negotiations down the road in order to ensure that they stay sealed. But as this goes, if he were to drag this right into a courtroom, then of course it all becomes public. And those names ultimately, if they do testify, because through discovery, they'll get every option to be able to cross those witnesses by getting a hold of them, to interview them, etc., if they so consented. But yeah, they'll stay sealed as long as it is legally possible.
By the way, I was kind of daydreaming a little bit, not because what you were saying wasn't interesting, but I started to think what Phil would be saying just about the music alone, let alone what happened. So it was a good day for Phil's Wi-Fi to go out on the Big Island. What about this one, Tommy, from Francois Tabor? Is there a Jay-Z nexus here? He's another big one. Also has a couple places here in Miami where I am. I've never been invited to some of these parties. It's kind of crazy. But what about what do we know about? Yeah, what do we know about Jay-Z?
The Carter family, Sean Carter and his wife Beyonce Knowles.
Hold on, Scott. Have you ever heard of Beyonce, Scott?
Yeah, I've heard of her.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll tell you. What's funny is I'm not a fan of any of this music, actually. But the story.
Tommy, by the way, what kind of music are you into?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you, man.
You're into country.
I'm a Billy Joel fan.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, nice.
Right.
Huge
Joel,
Billy
that's
Joel
awesome.
fan. But
Oh.
the Jay-Z and his wife, their names keep coming up, and they keep coming up in the exact same way that Diddy's name keeps coming up. The people who seem to really have been very close in his sphere of influence, who are no longer friends with him, are screaming, if you think what he did was bad, wait till you see what the Carters have been doing. So I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing Jay-Z and Beyonce in this case. I'd be really surprised if we were not.
Huh. This is so, I mean, this is getting very, I had no interest in covering this, but now that Tommy's talking, I'm sort of becoming more interested. Tommy, is it true that Diddy, once Puff Daddy, now Cuff Daddy by dubbed that by Nancy Grace, is it true that Diddy has filed a lawsuit that Cassie is his girlfriend, right? Beautiful woman, by the way, who
Beautiful.
he beat up in a hotel lobby. That was difficult to watch, but has he now filed suit against her? I didn't catch that.
There was he made a threat. He said something in a video that they were getting ready to file a lawsuit against her because this was just a case of a disgruntled ex-girlfriend. But Joel, there's no filing anywhere that I can find. So I haven't seen a lawsuit. He did say that for a crowd of people, but I have not seen that yet in writing.
By the way, there's a crazy story. They out of Kentucky. Well, there's two. There was a manhunt that Phil and I covered last week. They discovered that person. He unalived himself. I just got an alert that they have positively identified him as Joseph Couch, the fugitive who was on the run. He unalived himself in a heavily wooded area. But then there's another story that broke yesterday, and I think we're going to do it on Sunday night because we've got hopefully some insiders, people who know this case. But it's a sheriff in a rural county of Kentucky walks into a courthouse, goes into the courtroom, says hello to the bailiff, asks to see the judge. Judge says, sure. They're talking for a bit. Then he gets up and he locks the door of his chamber, and then he unloads his gun chamber, firing at least 6 rounds, killing the judge. And now there's rumors swirling about all sorts of things about why this would happen. This is literally a sheriff murdering a judge. I'm not talking a deputy. I'm talking the sheriff murdering a judge in this town. So look for that. We might be doing that on Sunday night.
Wow.
Scott Duffy, there is no dearth of violence in this country. Scott Duffy, I don't know this case well, and I may be naive, but how can this have gone on so long without intervention or repercussions? I mean, Scott, there's got to be. I mean, people. This has been an open secret for many, many years. Why did the feds wait till now?
Oh, obviously, they had something that said, "Hey, this is irrefutable. Go ahead and move forward." Yeah, like anything else, and this case is no different than any other big case where money and fame are attached to it. These are very methodical with regards to as you plant your seeds and you start to develop everything that you're developing into whatever it is you're doing, and in this case, the human trafficking and all the subsets charges. You are able to exploit, and you know what people's vulnerabilities are, and you know everybody. So you have contacts in government, you have contacts in the celebrity world, and then it just keeps snowballing. And there are always these little things that pop up, and people say, "Oh yeah, I remember that," and then it dies on the vine. So I would venture to say that as a result of somebody's stature, the tremendous amount of money that they have, that and the tremendous and it all comes back to power. It is amazing what somebody can do to squash somebody in the realm of celebrities. They are, it's easy for them to turn a true victim into a perpetrator. So this way they can also continue to exploit them and not have them be a witness against them. It's just, it's an amazing unfolding of events, especially in light of, it seems like everybody across the board, even all your big sports teams during, Super Bowl and World Series, that involve this human trafficking and the human trafficking awareness and stop the human trafficking. Everybody's against human trafficking, yet it continues to be done in such a big way under our noses. And so this is a good thing. And then hopefully it is, the government's powerful, but the hammer has finally come down, and now let's see what side people choose, and that's ultimately what's going to come down to.
Yeah, and Scott from I'm So Tired, which should be my screen. That should be the name of my podcast, actually. But how long would a case like this take? Adelson's going on 10 plus years. Rich Buddy says, federal case, open shut. This will be done in 8 months max. Do you agree with Rich Buddy?
Yeah, no, not especially with what this is. And 8 months in, let's just say, I don't know when HSI opened up that case prior to a search warrant. So they might have been working on it for some time. And then obviously the search warrant was, hey, we've gone public. And then of course it dies down, allowing the government, as Tommy said so well, there are some choices that the government can say, hey, I think we're going to develop a lot more evidence if we leave them out and closely monitor them, right? So and then look what it's almost like he's feeding out of their hands. It just can't help himself. And so 8 months is extremely, especially with the amount of money that he has. And then I don't even think the government has touched the surface with who they know to be victims, witnesses, and then of course co-conspirators. 8 months is
so to hear the words guilty on all accounts, assuming those come out of a juror person,
that's a lot more than 8 months. Even though the government likes to move pretty quick, I would say definitely within your 2 years, because of all your, in other words, the case can move. The government's case is moving at a pace because now it's meeting deadlines, but the defense can slow it down.
Well, let me tell you something. The federal courts better get a GoPro in there. They don't televise their trials, which is, by the way, Phil Waters would scream at me, but since he's not here and I don't have to be afraid of him today, I will say they got to get a camera in that courtroom, but they never will. Another one for Scott. Then we'll get back to Tommy about life in jail for Diddy went from yachts and mansions to sitting in one of the most notorious jails in Brooklyn, New York. How is this a RICO case? So that's racketeering, Scott Duffy. Confusing, S-Ray says, because the mob made money off of criminal organizations, and Diddy was the customer, not the seller. Confusing. Can you help to clarify? Because I have no idea why this is a RICO case. I'm sure Tommy does, but Scott, first stab at this one.
But that bottom part is throwing me off as to why they consider Diddy to be a customer.
I don't know. Tommy, do you?
No, I'm with him on that. It was making sense to me up until that line. He was, as far as I'm concerned, selling, not buying. But
yeah. So I mean, Scott, more broadly, like, what is a RICO? Why would they bring RICO charges? What does that do to the case?
RICO is an amazing charge that the federal government can have, and it just allows many things to come under a RICO statute, as opposed to, for example, even in the federal government prosecution, but locally, let's just say the locals are going to charge a murder, locals are going to charge sexual assault, the theft of this or that. And RICO is able to kind of sweep it all under one umbrella. And then it is able to, very much like it decimated criminal organizations such as the mob, that it is able to, for example, let's just say, for argument's sake, P. Diddy is the top, and then you can give the same amount of potential sentences and charges to underlings across the board. And so somebody down here who is still important into the case can be charged just as bad as the leader himself. So it's very encompassing. It can levy charges. For example, if I commit a murder based upon my bosses above me that kind of orchestrated it, then we're all going down for murder. And so RICO is able to take just so many different charges, so many different individuals, and charge them under the RICO statute. And it's very difficult. The government really has to stack up their evidence and their witnesses here, but it's so far reaching. And when people hear they've been hit with a RICO, for example, you can have his financial analyst or his financial advisor. You could have his lawyers involved if they're complicit in some way that the government under a RICO statute, where it's like, well, I didn't have anything to do with that. Well, guess what? You've been hit with a RICO charge. So it is the government's big stick. It is.
Tommy, big stick is a word we got to be careful to use in this story. But Tommy Scoville, Usher, another guy. By the way, I met Usher at the Super Bowl. I took the elevator with him when I was working for Fox News, and he was one of the nicest guys. Probably the whitest teeth I've ever seen in my life. I just couldn't get past his teeth. I was looking at each one, like his incisor. I was just staring at it. I was like, that's the most beautiful incisor I've ever seen in my life. But what's the deal with Usher? I mean, without getting too graphic here, obviously,
Sure.
but is he part of this, or is he a victim in this?
Both. I would say both. His parents, in their infinite wisdom, gave Diddy control over him. It basically gave him parental rights when he was 13. He got dumped off to what they called flavor camp. This was L.A. Reid that put this together. And he went to Diddy flavor camp, where he lived with Diddy in the 90s. When all of this partying was going on, here was a 13-year-old musician watching all of the debauchery that was going on at Diddy's house. Now, there has been a lot made of the fact that he had to go to an emergency room while living at Diddy's house for some stuff that we're not going to mention on here, but he was injured to his backside. He then procured Bieber. He was the one that brought Bieber to Diddy. He discovered him online, and there is speculation as to whether like Scott said, whether the abused becomes the abuser. That very well may be the case with Usher. But Usher's been, although he has said he would never send a child to Diddy's flavor camp the way his parents did with him, that's about as bold as he got in terms of saying anything negative about any of that. So he's not turned yet.
I mean, Scott, your gut instinct here. Are we going to hear from Justin Bieber? I know Ashton Kutcher's another former friend, and what was the Ashton Kutcher connection, Tommy?
They both seem to like it when girls are a little less than of their wits. That to me seems to be the connection. He was a close friend of Danny Masterson. He was a close friend of Diddy. They both seem to like to mix drinks themselves before they give them to women. I think that may be the common denominator. They were hanging out a lot. He was going to a lot of those parties, and he, unfortunately, like everybody else, has got a lot of video of him talking about Diddy parties, and it has not aged well. Stuff where he says, well, I can tell you a story. This one time oh no, I can't tell you that story. And he just continues to do that for a few minutes. It's pretty ugly.
He doesn't strike me as the brightest bulb in the box, but by the way, Tommy also is pretty much a expert on the Danny Masterson case, who of course was convicted of, I'm not going to say the word, the R word, and he's serving time, a long time. So this is going to get much crazier. Scott Duffy, quick one here, and then I want to get to some of kind of like the what happened this week. But from Becky England, I wonder if Becky England lives in England. I've never asked her. Becky, let us know where you live. If the government can seize assets acquired as a result of criminal activity under RICO, what would stop Diddy's camp from selling off assets prior to conviction? Do they have him on lockdown now in terms of, like, are his assets going to be like frozen, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends what the government chooses, or is. I could tell you just on my side, I went after drug dealers, high level drug dealers from my perspective. It's a very difficult thing to get things seized, especially when so many things are never I would imagine us and our audience. It's in my name or so forth. So there's so many different layers of ownership, how that gets dispersed. So, the government obviously wants to seize everything it can in order to as part of its punishment. But seizing assets is a pretty difficult thing. You might be able to take one thing here, one thing there. You show the paper trail, um, but it's to just all of a sudden seize things. It's a lot more difficult.
So Tommy Scoville, this is the part that freaks me out, not to be confused with a freak off, but Diddy is now he's gone from the yachts and the mansions here in Miami, and he's now at I want to say, what is it, MDC Metropolitan, yeah, MDC Brooklyn. It's the Federal Detention Center. They say he is on an unalive watch, so he does not unalive himself. Walk us through from the moment he was arrested and booked in, what did he experience in those first few moments and hours?
Sure. For the first 24 hours, I would imagine, because he was not put on the watch that you're talking about in the first 24 hours. So I would assume that he thought he was just going to be spending the night, right? I really think that that's probably the case. When the $50 million offer for bail was turned down, that's the magistrate judge. Then he gets a shot at the next judge who's going to look at it for the first time. They came with a different offer, which was incredible. We're going to have a private security firm that is all run by former federal officers that are going to babysit Diddy. They're going to remove any ability for him to make a phone call, to surf the internet, to do anything. They're going to put somebody at the door to have
Scott, I bet you that would have paid well, Scott. You should have gotten that gig, and I would have you could have podcasted live. You could have streamed live from Diddy's home. Go on.
You talk about money. The people that could tell you what was going on in that house. I don't think the paycheck would be the money, but they literally had the greatest idea. If you're trying to get your client out of jail, they eliminated every problem that the state or the government rather could say that he couldn't have been contacted anyone, blah blah blah. He thought, I believe, that he was going to get out. I think that he thought his money would get him on the street, and when it didn't, I do believe that he said some stupid stuff, which is why he is now on the watch. That watch means that he's sitting in a cell that doesn't have a bed in it. Right. There's just a mattress on the floor. There's nothing metal in the room. And sitting across from him, there's a piece of glass in the door. It's not a normal cell. And sitting across from him 24 hours a day will be an inmate that just stares at him. And if you want to engage him in conversation and he wants to talk to the guy, he can. But the inside, it's called My Brother's Keeper. And it's a program that you volunteer for as an inmate. You get trained to do. And you're drug tested and all kinds of other stuff because they make sure that you're not the kind of guy that's going to pass something to somebody. And then, so he's in a living hell. He's absolutely in a living hell. And he's found out that there's nothing. He's got no radio. He's got no books. He's got nothing. He's wearing an oven mitt, right? A Barney Rubble suit that is Velcroed at the top and at the sides. So, I mean, he's in the most uncomfortable, honestly, you could not be in a place that's worse.
I heard he's getting an hour in the yard. I mean, first of all, just take us inside and I know I don't think you've spent time
actually,
there.
They're identical. All of them are basically identical.
I mean, what's the smell? What's the sound? What's the temperature like? Like, how cold or hot is it in there?
They usually tend to keep the temperature on the cold side, not the hot side. So if you happen to be really thin, you can even put in to get thermals because they do keep the place always cold. He doesn't have that option. He's wearing a dress. So he's freezing his you-know-what off. The unalive cells that they watch these people to make sure they don't hurt themselves, depending on the place, is either in medical or more than likely it's in the SHU, right? So he's in the segregated housing unit, and one cell per floor is designated as a you-know-what cell to make sure that somebody doesn't hurt themselves. And again, it's got a glass door And for the first 24 to 72 hours, you don't even have a toilet, right? You don't have the ability to go get a glass of water. If you want water, you knock on the window, you ask the inmate, he brings a cop over, you get your little cup, which is crushable because nothing can hurt you in there, right? Your toothbrush has to go on your pinky so that you can, and then they take that back from you. They really make it, you can't have a pen, you can't have a pencil, you can't have paper. I mean, he has nothing but his thoughts of what the rest of his life is going to be like.
How long could that last? How long could that last?
Worst case scenario, if you were to buck the system, like if they say we're putting you on the unalive watch, they usually have something they want to get at it. I spent 32 days on one. That's a really extreme case. But 72 hours is about considered that's the normal period at which they're going to reevaluate him and determine whether or not he is still a threat to himself. If he is not, he will be put not into general population. Obviously, he can't be in general population, but he'll be put into the shoe in solitary. I don't think they're going to give him a cellmate. That would be really, really wild if somehow he got a cellmate this early in the game.
Scott Duffy, Ned Smith, always with the really thought-provoking questions, and I'm glad it was asked. This is a fantastic question. You have seized drugs and these sorts of things. Have you ever heard of the Fed seizing 1,000 bottles of lube? And what does happen to these bottles of lube? Do they get resold on a secondary market? Does every FBI agent get to take one home? How does this work?
Hold on, I'm calling Phil for that one. Listen, if they took them right now, it's evidence. So there's an evidence locker somewhere that has
holding 1,000 bottles of lube. Really?
Absolutely. They're not going to take them because they're not going to. That's not. I wouldn't say that's an asset.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: if they're, I assume that they're like in pallets and like wrapped and everything, but they're not going to sit there and like fingerprint 1,000 bottles of lube, are they?
No, I'm just trying to think.
Has anyone ever asked you if they're going to fingerprint 1,000 bottles of lube before in your life?
You are the first.
That sentence does not get used very often, I promise.
I feel so good about this. I feel great about this, actually, that I'm the first to ever ask you that question. Go ahead, Scott.
I think it also goes to show how, I don't want to say over the top, but so, for example, let's just take it because I haven't done a case like this that would, where I had to take lube out as an evidence in an evidence bag. But if instead of just taking a several, and in order to test it to say this is what we believe it is, this is what it is, it also backs it. Remember, it also corroborates witnesses. So if a witness says, I go into this house and there's all these bottles, that corroborates a witness. That becomes credible. So it's important. However, to take 1,000 out of the house as opposed to, okay, let's take 10, 15, 20, whatever, and then document the rest and photograph them in place. That goes, it's like, why do they need to take 1,000 bottles out? Because that does become evidence. That's, to me, they are thinking way ahead to say we want to overwhelm a jury with our presentation if it comes down to it, as opposed to, okay, here's what it is. And most people in the jury would be like, okay, why is that a crime? Why is that this or that? But when they see 1,000 bottles, then they're like, it's awe striking to where they're like, I think the government's telling their story makes sense, that this is debauchery. This is not just some sick freak off this or that. This is a true crime of using others. I mean, it is, they are thinking well in advance. Plus, I imagine they're also making calls. We got 1,000 bottles. Do we want to take everyone? Could we just take a few? And somebody made the call. No, take them all.
That's honestly, I'm amazed by this.
I'm glad they did, by the way. Honestly, because in the beginning, this is going to get a lot of memes and it's going to be a lot of jokes and things like that. But I think the takeaway, somebody said something in one of my live feeds that really made me think about this, but the number of victims that 1,000 bottles of personal lubricant could assault is a terrifying subject. And I think that's probably why they didn't take 10 of them. You know what I mean? I think that it really, Scott nailed it. I mean, think of how huge this is, right? What a
Tommy,
massive operation.
if you had to put a number on victims, or you think it's thousands, tens of thousands? I mean, it's been going on for 30 something years.
We know right now that a number that's getting bandied around a lot's 180. Right. So I don't know if that's the number of people that they've already talked to who have said that they were victimized by this cat or whatever, but that number keeps coming up a lot. So,
and I understand now that he's behind bars, some people are a little more comfortable coming forward. Has that happened?
Yeah, there are people we're certainly starting to see the first one being like Aubrey O'Day was an artist of his that had already said some things, but is now speaking out with a lot more. She seems to be a lot more comfortable speaking out, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And to misdemeanors, OG's question, Diddy probably is not going to be green lighted for abusing women. Sadly, that's the truth. And the reason being, what he's going to be accused of is probably going to be inside called pimping. And in all honesty, that particular car doesn't have a problem with that. However, there's a lot of people out there that say that this man was a confidential informant for the FBI for a number of years. And this is a recurring theme. He had a bodyguard that used to drop him off at the FBI office in New York and then come back and pick him up. And he's done a lot of videos.
Diddy himself is an informant.
That's right. Yeah.
Scott Duffy, could you weigh in on that? I mean, if he was an informant for the FBI, why would we be here right now? Wouldn't he be working with the feds?
Bulger was.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time, right? By any means. I mean, you're talking about, if it's true. Let's just say, for argument's sake, it's true. Look at Whitey Bulger. Look at any one of your top mobsters that enjoy that foot in one world and foot in others. In other words, if I provide the government a little bit of information, they'll turn the other way when it comes to me. And then perhaps over time the government's going to give me a little bit of information just because of conversation, and then I'm going to provide that to where I need to. So I hope not, because there's nothing more devastating to when an informant, and I've operated quite a few, you're not working angels, and so they have their hand in things. What you hope and what you try your best to is to ensure that whatever it is they're doing is not, you're always hoping that they're not committing criminal acts, but at the very least not hurting others, not taking from others, and then sometimes you turn a blind eye to small things, constantly trying to have oversight. But in this regard, such a huge, if everything is true, if a little bit of it's true, the fact that if it comes out that he was informing and was in, not just what we call pocket sources, right? The hip pocket source, but somebody that has some sort of a number and is providing information, whatever that may be. Yeah, it would be devastating, because you're talking about the handler, the FBI handler, or whatever government agency handler who's responsible for ensuring the safety of others. Gosh, it would be devastating and quite sad.
Tommy Scoville, is Diddy, I'm not sure if you mentioned this a moment ago about his jail experience right now, but is he allowed, I guess, other than his attorney, does he get a call a day or 2 phone calls? What's the deal with his calls?
So if you're on the watch, you're not getting phone calls. Now, if he's just in the shoe, he can put a note in the door and ask them to bring him a telephone, and he will be on the pecking order list for whoever got that out first. You're lucky to get one a day in the shoe. If you get 1 phone call a day, that's nice. Normally, shoe inmates are limited to how many calls they can make a month. So if he's in the shoe, it's if he's there not because he did something wrong, sad for him, it still limits the number of phone calls he's going to be able to make. Just the shoe it's not like being in general population where you can walk up to the phone and use it all day long. It's going to be very difficult for him to get a phone in there.
Tom Dallas weighing in here, could have something to do with the Tupac murder. Who knows? They've got one of the guys from that right now. I think who was indicted. I don't think there was a trial yet.
Keefe D.
Yeah, him. And Tommy, one of the fears, and I'm going to ask Scott about this $50 million bail in a minute, but one of the fears, you said it, was not that he was going to flee, but that he was going to maybe off people or intimidate people. Does he have a way to do that inside the shoe?
It would be a lot harder for him to get information out. He would probably need to have his lawyer would have to be crooked. I don't see any other way. Because the ability to get something out to the street without them hearing what you're saying, the only way you're going to do that is through a visitor. And at this point, I don't think he's going to be allowed to see anybody other than an attorney. When you're on the watch, even when you're in the shoe, you can get one visit a week in the shoe for 30 minutes. But an attorney can come in there whenever, right? There really is a whole lot of leeway for attorneys and their ability to see their clients. They don't mess much with that.
Scott Duffy, this has been a show with a lot of firsts. You've never been asked if you have personally seized 1,000 bottles of lube. And now I'm going to ask you, have you ever heard of a $50 million bail offered by the defendant, and then that being rejected by the judge? I mean, $50 million, I don't recall ever hearing a number that high. Am I mistaken?
Oh, no, that's huge. But I can tell you that, and the nice thing about this being in the federal system, we don't have a bail system, right? It's you can be let out because you're not a threat to society and you're not a flight risk, and so thereby you get out with certain contingencies. You post whatever the amount of money or property, but ultimately, if a judge decides you're a flight risk and or a threat to the witnesses and victims, etc., it's over. You're staying detained until your trial, until your day in court, or whatever comes first, a plea. So, he can offer all he wants. He could offer every last penny he has to his name. It's not going to mean anything to a federal judge.
Wow. And Tommy Scoville, by the way, Scott Duffy, could you put up a $50 million bail?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I just
would you call
Phil?
Yes. Have him sell the Ferraris.
Have him sell the Ferrari.
Yeah.
Nice.
Come get me.
Tommy Scoville. So we talked about Diddy's reaction to being in jail. What do you think the inmates' reaction to Diddy being somewhere in that same MDC as they are? What do you think the reaction is from these inmates? They all know he's in there, right?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely changed every single thing that's going on in that building. I don't care if you're 9 floors down. The only thing anybody's talking about is the fact that Diddy's in that building. And I've been in federal facilities when famous people have been brought in, and it definitely changes everything. The guys in the shoe are ruining his life, because that's just how the shoe is. The segregated housing unit is loud 24 hours a day. People scream at other inmates and talk crap because they got nothing to worry about. There's no chance in hell they're letting anybody out. No one can get at each other. It's one of the few places in a federal prison where there is zero respect. There's an awful lot of respect among inmates, but in the shoe, guys feel like, no one's ever going to be able to reach out and touch him. I'm sure that they're yelling all kinds of stuff and making his life a living hell.
So it could be 2:30 in the morning, and someone will be banging on a metal door and calling him, I don't know, a name.
Yes. You betcha. Yeah, it doesn't matter what time of the day that goes on, and then just guys yelling to each other. I've done a lot of time in the hole, and if you got a friend who's in cell 1 and the next guy's in cell 26, they're having a conversation, right? And they're yelling back and forth to each other as loud as they can, ending each sentence with the phrase, "You heard?" Right? It's the worst thing in the entire world. The shoe is, it's not a place to get any sleep, even if you're sleeping like a baby. And I would imagine this guy's not. So this is going to be really hard on him.
Yeah, Tommy, you're definitely a different fabric than yours truly, because I would try to probably slam my head into the wall as hard as I could 1,000 times. But how do you stay sane? Like, and do you think Diddy, we talked about his dad. Do you think he, you know, kind of the gangster life, do you think that's going to make it easier? The fact that he's so wealthy is going to make it that much harder for him?
It's going to make it that much harder. It's not going to make it that much easier. This guy, no matter where he goes, anywhere in the system, when he steps on the yard changes. And it's not that way for most inmates. I mean, you can roll onto the yard, and most people aren't even going to, there's going to be a group of people that come up and go, I need to see your paperwork, make sure you're not a piece of crap, make sure that you're not a rat or whatever. But not every person on the yard is going to come up and want to know who you are. It's usually just the people in the unit you're in. You don't have to deal with a lot of people up in your business. This guy rolls onto that yard, and it doesn't matter what unit you're in. Everybody's either going to want to either be this dude's friend or punch him in the face. And if they want to be his friend, it's because they intend to hand them a store list and then say, you got a ton of money if you want to stay safe on this yard, right? He is a guy that's really got the potential to be taxed pretty badly. And the gangster thing with this guy, I mean, for sure, he's a bad person. Whether or not he's a tough guy becomes a little different. You know what I mean? When people bring weapons and things into play, you don't have to be a really tough guy to pull a trigger, but he's now going to be someplace where he doesn't have anybody to guard him, and he's going to be someplace where he can't grab a weapon easily, and he's going to find out if he's tough. It's going to be one of those situations.
Wow. I'd be biting and chewing on people's ears. I'd be Mike Tysoning everybody I could if it came to that. I would say this. I'd be swatting imaginary flies and just talking to myself. I would like pour water on my hair to make it look super greasy. I'd mat it down like Jim Carrey. I've got a whole plan, like Jim Carrey and whatever the hell Ace, whatever the movie that is, Ventura, whatever. I have no idea. Anyway, misdemeanor here is saying, Joel, get Jaguar Wait on your show.
Right.
I mean,
Jaguar
who is that
Wait.
person? She was blacklisted by Diddy, she says, and there were attempts on her life because she wouldn't play his game. Steve Cohen, while you're out there frolicking around Ann Arbor for your Michigan football team, I understand why people get obsessed with why, and I'm a huge sports fan, but watching guys who are 18 years old throwing around a leather pigskin, 110,000 people go and sit there. It's not even cold there, but you go in like, December and it's like -30 and these people are sitting there rooting for the team, whatever. But what was I just saying? Oh, this person. So who is this person? This Wait.
Jaguar Wright. She
Yeah,
was
right.
a musician. She was a singer, had a pretty good voice, and was Diddy destroyed her career, and since then she's tried to return the favor. she's made videos. This has been going on for way before this guy got caught. She's been calling for and talking about what kind of person he's been for a really long time. The rumor is this investigation started in 2016. That's the rumor that keeps getting bandied about, is that the Fed started building this case in 2016. So they have been doing this for a long time. I think it just finally got to a head because Cassie Ventura handed them, a case already done. Here's some video, here's some audio, right? Here's all the proof.
Do we know who leaked that video, by the way? I mean, that video got out, but do we know who the person, I mean, was that person's ever been outed, right?
No, and it's funny because Diddy's attorney really made a point of saying, I can't believe that this video got out into the public. And it just really sounded like, hey, we paid somebody off for this. What the hell is this thing doing getting, and the word is he gave $50,000 to make that go away. So I guess whoever did that probably double dipped. Maybe they sold it after they sold it to Diddy.
Man, he should have given more than that. Jay Hendricks to Scott Duffy, does it make sense for Diddy to try to get a plea deal? Is that even an option? And by the way, this too, Scott Duffy. So the plea deal is one. And then if he really was an informant, then this is just a show. He's really in protective custody because somebody wanted him gone. Your comment to both those questions?
Well, it all depends where he is on that pecking order for that second statement, right? If he's low on the pecking order, it's one thing, but it doesn't sound like he's low on the pecking order according to this. So, yeah, everybody I dealt with, and I tried, and this is a true pleasure to be on the other side here with Tommy. And I will say, in every circumstance, I try to to push with attorneys, not outside the attorneys. Hey, it's best for you to plea. It's best for you to plea. And of course, it comes down to if people say, well, what am I going to get? I'm not going to get a whole lot off in here and whatnot. Well, 5 years is better than 10. If somebody's looking at 25 and you're offering them 18, 19, they're like, that's still a long time. Then they go to trial and get to 25. I've personally, more recently at the end of my career, dealt with somebody where we offered him 3 years because there wasn't a whole lot, but we knew this was our guy. And he looked at us and he goes, if you're only offering 3, you got nothing. Sometimes it is a game of poker here. And then it went to trial. We developed what we needed to. So he got 33, right? Now he's kicking himself. So there's no doubt here. This is not a plea to 10, 15, 20, 25 years. This is too big of. So a plea could be you plead a life in exchange for whatever it is that's worse. This is big time. But I would say even here the government would entertain all reasonable pleas, which is still substantial time, but in order to save the victim witness list, for sure.
Look at Black Widow.
So glad you said that.
Yeah, real quick. Look at Black Widow in the Republic of Ireland. Scoville looking fine. Here we are talking about a man. Look at what's on Black Widow. Go ahead, Tommy.
I'm glad that he said. I'm glad Scott said that. I really am, because I think that this is a real difference between state and federal, and I'm glad that it was pointed out. In the feds, you can turn down a 3-year deal and get 35 years. Right? That doesn't happen very often in state. If you turn down a 3-year deal in the state, very often you're looking at 3 years if you get convicted, or 5 years or 10 years. In the feds, if they give you a deal and you decide not to take it, you're going to need that 1,000 bottles of lube, right? I mean, honestly, if you don't take the deal that the feds put on the table, they're going to get you, and you're going to do a lot of time. It's the reason that everybody is, everybody gets had. People are terrified. When you get your paper, it says the United States of America against Tommy Scoville versus Tommy Scoville. And you go, it literally sucks the oxygen out of your lungs, because they've got the biggest private investigative firm on the planet, right? The FBI. You can't really fight the federal government. You say, I'm going to hire a private investigator and I'm going to go out there and, well, you got the FBI as the people competing against your private investigator, right? You're going to say, I'm going to hire 5 or 10 really good attorneys. Well, you got the largest group of attorneys in the United States. The Department of Justice has got more talent in it. I mean, this is really like, this isn't hack stuff. He's going against the United States of America and all of the weight that brings. I don't care if you're a billionaire. This is, you don't win, and he's going to get a lot of time. If there's a deal, he should take it. I don't think they're going to offer him one, but
yeah. There you go. Diddy, if you're listening in the shoe, if the Brother's Keeper has a laptop facing your way and you're listening, email me, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. We'll stream you out of MDC if they let us. By the way, if you appreciate all the knowledge of both Scott Duffy and Tommy Scoville, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. The COE is putting a lot of stuff into Patreon. It's another way to support the channel. It is very much appreciated, all those things. And also, just tell a friend. Tell your next door. Say, hey, Charlie, my next door neighbor, I'm listening to a cool podcast. There's a guy named Scott Duffy. He's awesome. And Tommy Scoville. Check it out. That helps us. It's a little role play right there. So Tommy Scoville. In this court hearing this past week, some text messages came out. This is now Diddy texting Cassie Ventura, who was the girlfriend who the video emerged of him basically really hurting her in a lobby that's difficult in the hallway of a hotel, which is difficult to look at. The text message says, and I quote, this is from Diddy to her: "Call me. The cops are here. I got 6 kids. You please call. I'm surrounded. You going to abandon me all alone?" To which she responds to him. She says, this is, by the way, when this incident took place. I have a black eye and a fat lip. You are sick for thinking it's okay to do what you've done. I still have crazy bruising. When you get effed up, you knock me around. I'm not a rag doll. I'm someone's child. That really hit home for me as the father of 3 kids and the son to Carm. What do you make of these text messages? I'm sure there's plenty more where they came from.
Exactly what I was going to say. It's going to be really interesting as these things start to come out. This was very, I think this was timed perfectly, right, for them to bring this up during that particular hearing, because what we're talking about is the ability to put this guy back on the street and how he's not a threat, and he's really a nice guy, and he's got these kids he's taking care of. Within a couple of minutes of beating this girl up, and we all saw exactly what that looked like. His only fear is himself, right? You're going to abandon me, right? After I beat you up there at police here, and I got 6 kids. You're a billionaire. Deal with it. That's it's pretty disgusting stuff. It really is. And I'm glad that it's coming out, right? Because like every other case, there are going to be people out there. I've even seen a few comments already that said, these girls were partying. This is just kind of how it goes down. And that's not the case, right? If you have to guard the beverage you're about to drink, that's not okay. That's not how it works. And I really hope that this dude gets, I hope everybody involved in this, right? When Scott was talking about RICO, I think that the key point in this is somebody bought 1,000 bottles of lube, right? And I doubt it was Diddy. Somebody was procuring gamma hydroxybutyrate, the drug that he was putting into this stuff. And I bet that wasn't Diddy. And all of these people knew what they were mixing this stuff up for and what was going on. This is a crime organization, right? There's a lot of people that had to know what he was doing. This didn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah, by the way, Tommy, I meant to ask you this earlier, and I don't know her name. I think she's 37. She's like Diddy. Diddy calls her right-hand woman. She handles everything for him. I forget the name. What are they going to do with her, Tommy Scoville? Because she's got to know all the secrets.
I would imagine that there are going to be a lot of deals going around. That's what I would imagine. I would imagine that the federal government is going to be offering reduced sentences and giving people an opportunity to turn, evidence against Diddy, because a lot of these people, like his drug mule that we all saw pictures of getting picked up. This was a guy that just provided drugs and did all that. When they start tying that drug mule to these girls that got assaulted, he's going to start real quickly talking about all the stuff he did for Diddy. People look for a soft landing when they realize that they're getting wrapped up in it.
Yeah. And Tommy, what about the inmates must know about that video? They, they get info. What does that do to an what is that? How does that affect the culture?
Yeah, that's dicey. Even among, because normally I only speak for the white car because that's the only car I was in. But in any car, if there's a video out there, you beating up a woman, you're in trouble. There's video evidence out there of him really treating his mom pretty poorly. Gene Deal did a video where he said he saw Diddy put hands on his mom and curse at her. That kind of crap really carries weight in prison like you wouldn't believe. Somebody that hit their mom doesn't have anything coming from anybody. He's not going to be well liked if that story gets out.
Carm, I will never post that video of you from today where you were dropping it. I would never do that to you, ever. So Scott Duffy, I think the attorney's name, I believe his first name is Mark. His last name is Agnifilo. He didn't name. So one of the issues here is that they say the federal indictment really parallels Cassie Ventura's lawsuit, which was filed this past November. And then the lawyer, of course, comes out and says, without naming her at all, he says that the criminal case is an outgrowth of one long-term troubled but consensual relationship that faltered amid infidelity. So he's now pointing the finger at the victim. He says the freak-offs, he contended, were an expansion of that relationship and not coercive. The sex and the violence were totally separate and motivated by totally different things. That's the way these two adults chose to be intimate. So here's this lawyer now coming in and saying, there's no other victims. Those 1,000 bottles of lube were just for this cast. I mean, he's literally saying it's just between the two of them. I know he has a job to do. And I'm sure he's an intelligent guy. He's never going to win this argument in front of jurors, is he?
No, I think you said it exactly. He has a job to do. So this is his time to do it. and while everybody's watching and say there's nothing to see here, and this is, trying to quickly get public sentiment that, yeah, this is a civil thing blown up, and there's nothing else to see here. So that's a job of any attorney, and I wouldn't expect anything less. But that attorney knows, just like anybody else, that this is the federal government is not taking some civil suit and then redressing it and then coming down with charges such as a RICO, human trafficking, etc. So it's a last ditch effort.
I saw that lawyer on the news circuit the night Diddy was arrested, and he said 1,000% my client will be out of jail tomorrow, because he knew at that time that he was going to offer this $50 million bail, but it did not happen. So, but again, he's he's got to work for his client. That's what he's doing. From Britt K, Tommy Scoville, just wait until they get to Kim Porter's death. She's Diddy's, I think, ex-wife. I don't know if he was married at the time. Who is she? Did she die under mysterious circumstances? I thought she was ill, but what do we know about her?
Well, she was ill, right? She died of pneumonia, but there are a lot of people that say they really need to look into that, right? And the interesting thing is that all of the people that Diddy was originally involved with all seem to meet untimely and young deaths. So there's a lot of people that are and Kim Porter's death is just one of a handful of deaths that they're going to be looking into. And Tupac and Biggie. There's I can't describe to you how many different documents out there where he has been named in that case. I mean, it's got to be closing in on 100 at this point. Like, everybody that has ever been questioned about this said something about Diddy. It's almost just considered a fact that he was the reason that both of those people passed. At this point, that's almost considered just fact.
Tommy, this is an interesting point by Audrey Gore. Mixing GHB, which is basically what a roofie is, with booze causes fatalities. I can't imagine that never happened in the last 3 decades. Are we going to find out that some of these deaths, so you're just talking about Kim Porter, that maybe it was a result of that and not whatever they said it was?
He used, so that's GHB is considered one of the date what drugs.
Yeah.
There's also he was also using ketamine. There was a lot of different drugs he was using. All of them run the risk, especially when mixed with alcohol, of unaliving yourself. They're all respiratory depressants, and when you mix them, the 1 + 1 = 3. It really amplifies. I'd be shocked if they didn't accidentally unalive people. I really would. I would be shocked.
What about this, Tommy? I was under the impression that Diddy would be a celebrity in prison. Is this not true?
Here's the thing. People who are famous who go to prison very often get treated differently. The feds is a lot different than the state. I have seen federal inmates who were famous that weren't doing time a whole lot different than anybody else there. The other thing is that he's got way too much baggage. He's not just a famous person. He's as famous now for victimizing people as he is for being a musician or anything else. So he's not going in there just as a famous inmate. He's going in there as a famous scumbag. And here's the thing. Truthfully, somebody said earlier that inmates are the ultimate virtue signalers. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? Because they don't put up with this kind of crap, unless, of course, the guy's got a lot of money and they can tax him, in which case they'll let him pay rent until he runs out of money. And there's a lot of truth to that, man. There really is. This is going to be an unusual situation because other cars, right? Like other groups of people in there, you don't want to look like you're letting this guy get an easy pass in your group, right? It's going to look bad to every other group. I think he really is in I think we're late enough in here. He's in a shitstorm you cannot imagine, right? There's just no way that there's nothing that's going to be easy for this guy for the rest of his life, even if he doesn't end up penniless, which he could.
Wow. Scott from LEM, and then in a little bit, a couple more minutes, and then we'll move on to a couple other quick stories, and then we'll wrap it up. And again, a huge thanks, as always, to Scott Duffy, but of course to Tommy Scoville, who literally hopped on with less than probably 75 seconds notice. So He is a mensch, as we say in I don't know what. Scott, can you define what a handler is and what benefit it has to the FBI?
Yeah, great question, Ellie. So a handler is typically what a person is called who runs an informant. So every agency, every law enforcement agency has informants, as well as they should. That's what helps us figure our cases. Um, if I so just to explain, if I'm working a drug gang, if I'm working bank robberies, if I have an idea of who might be going in to do the banks, so then I do a little homework and see if I can develop somebody um, who can provide information relatively close to that bank robber, and so then I may short term wise say, hey. Would you work for the FBI? That would be an informant. That would be somebody who is providing information, useful information in a case that I happen to be working. And so I, as the case agent, would be the handler of that individual. And that handler has very, there are not only laws, but policies that dictate what a handler can do. So, for example, if I, as a handler, of an informant who I know is also has some criminal element to them, then I have to advise them. I have to provide information, um, bringing them in to ensure that I am not allowing somebody to go commit crimes under my watch. And so these, we call them admonishments and so forth. And then once a handler, whether it be in the FBI or in any other law enforcement agency, realizes that, hey, the person that was informing for me, providing intel, et cetera, um, has committed a crime, committing crimes, and is withholding, then I have to terminate that government informant relationship, and then move perhaps to make an arrest. So that's ultimately what a handler is in any law enforcement agency working an informant. And in the case of, if that question was asked with regards to, let's say, Diddy was an informant in some shape or form, um, if that's true, I can guarantee you those if there were reporting and records and so forth, those ultimately, they'll be contested quite a bit, but ultimately they can get those records. Will they be helpful to the defense? Will they be helpful to a prosecution? That's why it's very ugly to from my mind even go down that road. But perhaps he's providing intel outside of his criminal organization. Hey, I'm going to provide a little intel of what's happening down here. Are you guys interested? And in other words, it might have been intel that never turned into any type of case, developed it from it, and or it's enough for Diddy going to kind of test the waters. Hey, are you guys looking at me for anything? Should I tighten things up and so forth? If that explains it for Ellie.
Yeah. And Scott, what about there were other things seized, including a lot of narcotics when they did the raid on his homes, but also AR-15s, and the serial numbers were scratched off. That's pretty damn serious, isn't it, Scott, on a federal level?
Yeah, obliteration of a serial number on a gun. Absolutely. All
924C.
What 924C? What does that mean? I mean, I know what it means now, but translate that, Scott Duffy, a 924C.
Yeah, that's U.S. code 924C. And then, so you look up U.S. code obliteration. You cannot possess, much less be the one who's doing. So that in and of itself is a serious offense. It may be a stolen gun, and typically why do you obliterate? Because you don't want the tracking. You don't want the government to know where that gun came from. And then if I can use it in something and toss it, of course, the government, through modern technology, like all the other technological advances, can do some amazing work to pull up what looks to the naked eye a number never to be retrieved. I won't say not every obliterated serial number can be brought to life, but there are some amazing people out there who are very good at their craft and being able to produce a serial number. But yeah, just that in of itself is a crime.
Yeah.
And then adds to the whole RICO. Why would you want to have an obliterated serial number, and then to have several or more, whatever the quantity is, continues to go to show it's your use of force against another is it just, again, not a good thing to have.
And he's a felon, right? So felon in possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number, that alone would get the cat a pretty hefty sentence.
Yeah,
that's a good point. By the way, Tommy, real quick, people are mentioning, J-Lo allegedly, I don't know if it was proven, helped hide the gun from the 1999 shooting. Is she going to get dragged into this?
Let's
Seems like
hope
she's
so.
Miserable enough with Ben Affleck. With Ben Affleck.
Let's hope she does, because the word is that's the way that the pew pew, that's how it got into the building and that's how it got out of the building, is that she carried it in there in her purse. And if that is the case, this is the one where the rapper named Shine Barrow went to prison for this shooting, and he didn't do it. Right. And he's come out and been very open about it. He did it because he thought Diddy was going to help out the country that he's from. He's from Belize and now serves in the government over there. Seems to be a really stand-up cat now. But he went to prison for 8 years for a shooting that Diddy did. And everybody on planet Earth seems to know that. And I got to say to Nancy K, you cannot surf the internet while incarcerated. I don't know where you got that, but I assure you that as a federal inmate, you are not surfing the internet. You are not going to have a laptop. You're not going to have any of those things. They have a dedicated machine that will allow you to send an email and receive an email. It's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, by the way, you can't do it if you have a 5-year-old either, because he takes my phone constantly and or my laptop and or my iPad. And so Diddy and I have that in common. Pebble Z here. This one is for both of you. Scott Duffy, will he be bought, sold, or made cold? I guess the better way to ask this question, Scott Duffy, will Diddy be Epstein? How these worlds come together. Fascinating. Is he going to make it through this, Scott Duffy, or is there too much at stake? I mean, look, we talked about Jay-Z. These are billionaires, very powerful people, which is kind of crazy because they're just celebrities, but they have power. By the way, you should everyone needs to think about who they, idolize or worship, especially these younger people, because you just don't know who the hell these people really are. But Scott Duffy, does he survive to get to trial, do you think?
I'm going to put my money on that he survives and does make trial, though history hasn't really been too kind to these types.
Tommy, your answer to that, before you answer, does he survive? For Tommy to answer, is the MDC, this notorious federal lockup in Brooklyn, is it as dangerous as a level 3 or 4 prison? I assume 3 and 4s are the worst.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, it is. The problem with this place is its proximity to where everybody gets busted, right? So there's only one federal lockup now in the 5 boroughs of New York. So these people can see family members every day. And the more people you can see every day, the more drama, drugs, and crap you bring back into the facility. And my experience has been the more drugs in the facility, the more danger you're in, because that's why everything goes bad in prisons constantly. This is a notorious prison for being able to get any kind of dope you want. Everybody in the BOP talks about how much dope there is in MDC Brooklyn. It's an epidemic. They don't have enough staff. They're completely understaffed. They got somewhere between 1,300 and 1,600 inmates in there at any given time, which is more than they probably were built for. And then on top of that, currently they're sitting on 700 request forms to have things fixed that haven't been touched. Like, my shower's making noise while I sleep, right? That kind of crap will drive inmates to do really stupid things. And this is the reason that so many people get hurt at MDC Brooklyn. It is a very dangerous facility, to be sure. And I think he will get to trial. I don't think he's going to get unalived or take his own life. I think that Diddy's, although the tentacles may go out a lot farther, it's not massive politicians, and it's not these people whose names you think are running the world. It's a bunch of rappers and a bunch of people that a lot of the world are going to go, I'm sorry, boozy what? You know, I mean, these are names that most people aren't going to be associated with, and it's hip hop culture. It's not.
That's a
politics,
good point. Yeah,
you know?
that's a great point. Even though some of the names are huge, can't deny this. Scotty and Tommy are a great duo. I mean, we could even call it Scotty and Tommy. Poor Phil Waters, man. Just one absence, and the whole dynamic changes. That's it, I think, with this story. Let's just whiz through a couple other stories, mainly because I stayed up really late last night preparing this. We talked about a couple of them. The manhunt in Kentucky is now over. It looks like they've ID'd Joseph Crouch, 32, fired a whole bunch of shots, hit 5 people on Interstate I-75. On to the next Kentucky story, which I just discussed as well. I think we're going to do a show on this, maybe Sunday night. This is a Kentucky sheriff, not a sheriff's deputy, but the sheriff, Mickey Steins. He went into Judge Mullins' chambers, asked to talk to him, locked the door, and then fired 6 shots into him. He came out and just put his hands behind his back and said, "Arrest me." And we don't really know what's going on. Scott Duffy texted me. There was a family in Vermont. The guy was a lawmaker. They were all found dead. The guy's name, the father, was Brian Crossman, 46. Well, it turns out this was a mystery for a while. I think it was his son. Scott Duffy, you said you figured it was a family member. How come you said that?
Yeah, when it first came out, a lawmaker. So obviously, hey, why is that making the national trend? It's a lawmaker. It's or an elected official, and then of course his wife and young son, and then the autopsy. Traditionally, we see that as some sort of domestic related, whether it be a murder suicide or some other close family member, as opposed to somebody who's targeted. It's so rare for somebody to be targeted. For, let's say, something he did or something he didn't do enough for, and then especially so soon after the bodies were found, and law enforcement made the remark that the community is not at large at a threat, and that often says, hey, the law enforcement already has an idea of who it is, which is traditionally a family member, in this case an older son. Just another sad, tragic outcome to a family.
Tanya, I feel like it's getting worse, but people say like Scott's always been like this. I don't know. Back to Diddy, we can't get away from that. Tommy, can he get drugs in the shoe? Is that possible?
There are drugs in the shoe, guaranteed. There's a bunch of drugs in the shoe. Whether or not they're going to be willing to work with Diddy, and not necessarily be. I mean, most guys would take a shot just on the outside chance he could pay him, because he would pay him a fortune, right? He's probably sick right now. The guy does have an opiate habit, so he'd probably pay 10 grand for a fix. But he's so high profile, you're not going to be able to. The way you do everything in the shoe is by making a car, which is a weight on a string that you have to throw into somebody's cell and then fish stuff back. Normally in the shoe, you can get away with this. If you're in there on observation, there's no way anything's going into your cell, right? The first time a car goes under the door, the cop's coming in to find out what cell just threw something to you. I just don't see it happening. There are tons of guys in the shoe that are getting high today. I don't think Diddy's going to be one of them.
By the way, Steve Cohen and the COE, hip hop cop, NYPD detective. He was responsible for handling hip hop crimes in New York City in the 1980s. Get him on the show. Misdemeanors all over this. He knows all about NYC shooting when J-Lo had the gun. Detective Derek Parker, not to be confused with Peter Parker. Tommy Scoville, back to you on this one. There's a guy named Dr. Jay Varma. He was New York City's COVID czar. You remember the pandemic, Tommy?
I do.
Yeah. So he was the COVID czar for the city of New York during the pandemic. And we were all told, sit at home, don't do anything unless you lived in Florida, which you could go do whatever you wanted. Turns out that he was during this time going to sex parties, like private sex parties. He was bragging about it during the pandemic, while he was telling people, you've got to stay home. He was caught on a recording saying this. What about this hypocrisy, Tommy Scoville? You've got the COVID czar, stay home, lose your business, don't do anything. I'm going to go to sex parties, not the freak offs, but another type of sex. How many sex parties are going on, by the way? But Tommy, right. The hypocrisy.
I'm living the different life here, apparently, because I'm not getting invited to any sex parties.
You and me
must
both.
be doing something wrong or right. You know what? It's just we saw so many of these, right? I mean, normally it was a dinner party for politicians and nobody was wearing a mask, right? We saw that in, with the mayor of California or the governor of California. There's all kinds of these things that go on. I think this one's probably going to get a lot more news because of the fact that it's a sex party, right? But it's the same hypocrisy one way or the other. I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm not going to do it myself. It's pretty disgusting.
When I was in prison, this is from Kim. Thank you for sharing this. I know it's not easy. The guards were my best source for drugs. Look at this. This says not shocking at all. I was just going to say that's shocking, but it really isn't shocking, right, Tom? Tommy, what's the deal with these prison guards? Is it getting paid or what?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let's say that they're making $70,000 a year, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that's what they're making. There are guys in there that'll say to them, "I'll give you $70,000 today," right? It's there is such a chance, and it's the guards that are good. You'll know that they're good guards because you'll roll up and go, "Hey, boss, I got a question," and they will treat you like they do not want to know who you are. They do not want to be your friend. They don't want you making inroads because these guys are pros. It might take them a year of just getting a little bit more confidence and a little bit more confidence. And the first time the cop brings dope in, they're done. They're screwed. Because now they're going to have to continue to do so, or the inmate is going to immediately go and turn the person in. And that's what happens to them. In MDC Brooklyn, 5 people in the last 6 years have been busted for this. It usually is, sadly, cops. I mean, it's not that people aren't smuggling drugs in through visiting or whatever. They're not bringing in packages, right? They're bringing in an amount that the inmate can swallow and pass out. Guards can bring in piles of it. And when they do, the yard goes to hell. The violence goes crazy. I promise you, man, that there's nothing worse than a yard with a bunch of drugs on it, right? It's a dangerous place to live.
Well, Scott Duffy, this next story, former CIA officer. I don't know if anyone knows this. One of my oldest friends, Mark Polymeropoulos. He was a covert officer. He has books out, and he does all kinds of media, so I can say his name now. He's one of my best friends from 2nd grade. We played high school tennis together. Mark Polymeropoulos. He was in the CIA, but this guy, much different. He just pleaded guilty, Scott Duffy, to S-ang and basically GBHing. Yeah. More than 24 women in multiple countries now been sentenced to 30 years in prison. His name is Brian Jeffrey Raymond. He was sentenced in the U.S. District Court on Wednesday in D.C. in the District of Columbia. Also been ordered to pay $260,000 in restitution. I can't pull up his picture, but he's a very clean-cut, handsome-looking guy. This was discovered. The investigation was done by the FBI, and the FBI Assistant Director, David Sundberg, then thanked the brave women of the FBI for figuring this out and bringing this guy to justice. What about this, Scott Duffy? You're a CIA officer. You're supposed to be working for the United States Intelligence Service, and here you are taking advantage of your position. Also, incredible hypocrisy, incredible cojones. What would you say to this man if you had a word with him? Would you smack him in the face?
He got what he deserved. So, it's what, and as we've talked about a few, whether it be guards at MDC, whether it be or any of the our prisons throughout the country, whether it be a police officer, FBI, CIA. I mean, there is a certain level of trust that's placed into us by the public, and when we um, we dishonor that loyalty, that badge, for the sake of something, whether it some sort of a crime, power, just it's incredibly sad, because as Phil and I have talked so many times, it affects, I guarantee you, it affects the whole CIA, it affects the whole FBI, it affects the whole law enforcement community. It's tough enough of the very good men and women who are going in every day to try to do a good job in the prisons, and they know more than anything what they're dealing with, not only from prisoners, but from their own that are dishonoring that badge for the sake, whatever little gain that they get. It's just incredibly sad, but it is, unfortunately, history shows time and time again. It just it's a tough thing to overcome, but when cases happen, they should be well publicized, as they are here, to try to because, hey, anyone else that is thinking get out, the job is always to deter crime, but first and foremost to protect. So it's just sad. It's just incredibly sad when I hear that time and time again.
Yeah.
And this guy was really, really a lowlife. This dude was posing these people. And there was I guess he was stationed in Mexico for a while. That's where it started.
Yeah, Mexico City. By the way, Tommy, how's a CIA officer treated in a prison?
He'll never see anybody. FBI agent, CIA agent, previous guard. They're sent to a place in Phoenix. Black Canyon prison in Phoenix has one unit that is behind a fence, and the fence you can't even see through. It's got black like cloth along the fence, so you can't even see the people on the other side of it. They refer to it as the cheese factory, right? Because a lot of the people there are very high profile rats. But it's called the cheese factory. It's where Sammy the Bull had done some time, and that's probably where that person will end up.
Wow. This stuff is just fascinating. There's things you learn from Tommy and Scott Duffy. Sherry's News just read the Federal Bureau of Prisons, back to Diddy for a second, says it has increased staffing in recent months to make up for staggering shortfalls at the troubled New York City jail, where Sean Combs is awaiting trial. So on top of everything else, there might not be enough people to keep an eye. Who knows? Tommy, this next one's for you. I promise we're getting to the end here, but I did the work and I'm OCD, so I'm going to get through these last two stories. I think this is a 27-year-old Nebraska man. He posed as a high school student so he could lure in young girls. He has now been charged, and he is sentenced to at least 85 years in prison. He was, I think, having his way and working on having his way with young students as a 27-year-old. What would you say to this man, and how will he be treated in prison? He is, I guess, what we call a chomo.
Yeah, he did a 21 Jump Street move. And the incredible thing about this story is he went to a high school called something North. And then when he got caught trying to do things that weren't right with kids, he got bumped out the following year, tried it again at the exact same school, except the South campus, and they let him back into that one. So I think that the school probably has got a lot of dirt on their face on this one. If it wasn't for the parents, this kid would still be doing it. He was bold enough to go home with a couple of the students that he met in there. He graduated from the same school that he was. He made 54 days or 56 days or something as a student there. He was getting girls to send him images of them on their phone. You know what kind of stuff that is. And then on top of that, he was actually having physical contact with some of them. He got a real long sentence. It's amazing. I covered this story. To me, this shows you how far that a predator will go. The amount of effort that this person had to do. He had to find someone to pretend to be his mother, and all of this for no other reason. There was literally nothing that he was getting out of this other than the ability to victimize kids. And Scott, I was waiting for you to say John Conley's name when you were talking about handlers.
Yes. Yeah.
He ended up in prison, right?
Yeah, he for life, right? John Conley got life. He was the handler of Whitey Bulger, and he knew what Whitey was doing. And that was one of those cases, I think, that might be similar to this one, right? Because here was a guy that was a member of the Irish mob, kind of running the Irish mob in Boston and giving up all the Italians. And I think that this was one of those things where Diddy was giving up people in the hip hop community that weren't part of his camp, I think is what was going down. So there might be some similarities there.
Is he at the cheese factory, Tom? I want to get a shirt that says the STS Cheese Factory. We're always, but he's got to be at is he alive? I don't know. Is he at the cheese factory?
He is not yet passed. I think he's 83, 84, something like that. I'm not sure where they have him. I would imagine that would be a good guess, but I don't know exactly where he is in the system.
Scott Duffy, has this ever happened to you? Authorities, they got a lucky break. This was the U.S. Marshals on the hunt for a 20-year-old murder suspect. His name is Dario Wilkerson. They had a warrant for his arrest in connection with a fatal shooting in Memphis, Tennessee. They break into a home to look for him. Nothing. And then suddenly he falls out of the ceiling onto them. He falls from the ceiling onto them. Scott Duffy, in your illustrious career, has a murder suspect, ever fallen from the sky onto your head?
So that's a crawl space, an attic. We've had, I tell you, when you are on the fugitive hunt and they know you're coming and they have just but a few minutes to figure it out. I've pulled people out of some of the tiniest spaces that you might not otherwise look. And then, of course, I had somebody on a shelf, and thank God that shelf ultimately broke, which told us where this guy was. Two people go in, check the closet, up and down. You're doing a quick pushing away clothing. You're looking up, but you're like that, and your brain is saying that's a shelf that's not going to hold a human body, and amazingly so, where people can put themselves in such positions to hide. But that shelf gave, a bunch of shoes came down, and I am amazed at some of the places I've seen people hide. I will
scare the hell out of you when that thing came down, or what?
And there was a lot of screaming, and if I remember, the screaming wasn't from him.
Yeah.
Ida Shaw JD, Tommy, and she's married. You can see there, or at least with a partner. Tommy is my new intellectual / knowledge crush. Tommy, amazing. Did you always do well with
also
the women?
Also, the first thing that that's the first time that sentence has ever been uttered. It was a lot like have you ever dusted 1,000 bottles of lube? This is also the first time that sentence has ever been said out loud, I promise you.
By the way, look at Ned Smith trying to compete with Scott. She's had 2 lovers fall through a ceiling during a work Christmas party. Last time liquor was served at our office Christmas. That would be that'd be fascinating to see. We talked about the cheese factory, and I did not prepare, but incredibly, this relates to the cheese factory. Tommy Scoville, care to guess the top 5 most rat-infested cities in America? Real rats. These are not mob rats. These are real rats.
I would go New York and Atlanta, just from the 2 that I've witnessed in my life. That would be my 2 guesses.
Scott Duffy, the first 5 most rat-infested cities in America.
Cities. I mean, I'm kind of thinking. I hate to say New Orleans. I'm thinking New York. I've always heard bad things about. Philly, I've heard some bad things about. I would say Baltimore. So those are.
I'll tell you what they are right now. You guys are both right. New York City, number 1. San Francisco, number 2. Los Angeles, Space Coast, COE, number 3. Although LA is so spread out, I'm not that worried.
Right.
if I told you some of the size of the rats when I used to work in New York City that I would see on that subway, like you would not believe. I mean, they look like coyotes. Rounding out the top 5 most rat infested cities, Scott Duffy's hometown, basically Philadelphia, and then last but not least, the nation's capital, Washington D.C. It is great to be an American. Even our capital has a rat problem. Last but not least, go ahead, Tom.
Joel, I was punked out by a rat in a federal prison. I'm not kidding you. I had a layover at the in Atlanta, and they give you a bag lunch, and you've been on Con Air all day long or whatever. So I was laying down on the bench trying to sleep, and I had my bag of food on the floor. And when I woke up, there was a rat pulling my bag of food right away from where I was. And I looked at the dude next to me, and he went, "I already got mine, bro. I'd let him take it." and that was it. We both got punked out for our food, but I said, "That's okay. The rat can have it. I'll be all right."
I can't remember what the story was, but I had to go to LaGuardia when I was at Fox 5 in New York City. They sent me to LaGuardia. This is before they redid it. And I could not believe the number of rats that were just in the terminal walking around, and it was by the food court. And I was just disgusted. Anyway, last but not least, Scott Duffy is both a dog lover and a cat lover. This cat's name aptly was named Drifter, and he's now safe. He's home, safe and sound, after sneaking outside and getting trapped in a sewer for nearly 8 weeks. He's a 3-year-old tabby, an indoor feline who had aspirations, Scott, of becoming an outdoor cat. He went missing from the home of Clifton Nesseth and Ashley Comstock in Duluth, one of the coldest places on earth in the winter. But somehow the neighbors' kids came over, and they said that they heard meowing coming from a storm drain at a construction site. A little paw shot out of a tear in the fabric. It was a tabby cat paw. They were reunited. Scott, was he eating the rats to survive? How did he make it 8 weeks, basically in a drainage pipe? How do you think?
Yeah, I would venture to say anything that was moving, that cat was feeding off of. Cats are just amazing where they can go and how they can survive. So 8 weeks.
Yeah, my Ethel and Fred would be dead in 0.2 seconds. By the way, drove, I'll say it again, 16 hours with Steve Cohen to Tallahassee and back. I could not move today. It finally caught up with me. As per usual, door swings open. COE in a panic. Ethel is gone. Ethel's gone. Ethel's gone. Our boxer's gone. She leaves every couple of days to give herself a walk. I think she can just hop over the fence. Luckily, I've Apple tagged her. She has an Apple tag. And anyway, I had to get out of bed. I was exhausted. And then Ethel was just running back. I'm sure tonight it will be Fred. We do have a pool. And I will end on this note. And Ethel loves the pool. And Fred thinks that he can swim. But Fred's ass, I think I can say it now, always drops down. And then he starts to sink like a brick. And we literally have to lifeguard Fred. Like, we need a whistle and like the red lifeguard shirt, the white shirt with the red cross. Like, he has to be lifeguarded like a kid. And it's one of my biggest fears in life. I'm exhausted. I cannot thank Tommy and Scott enough. Tommy, we always leave with a final thought on Fridays. You once said something, I think it was you, Tommy, very interesting, and it resonated with me. And I believe it was you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so many people out there. Ben Affleck. Let me use him as an example. He's got everything. Beautiful women, movie star. He's got cars. He goes to casinos because he likes to gamble because he's a degenerate. And they say he's a miserable human being. And you once said to me that some of the most free people are not free because they're not free in their minds. Would you care to comment on that as a former inmate who is now actually free? Do you enjoy your freedom? What do you say to people about their freedom? Your final thoughts, Tommy.
I enjoy my freedom more than anything in the world. I owe it to a black inmate that I met in federal prison, and black and white guys aren't allowed to hang out. And this dude bent over backwards to try to help me get sober and get my life together. And I'll shout out to him. He's just getting a new court hearing, which is a beautiful thing. He's may have a shot of getting freedom. His name is Q, but I remember him walking up to me in prison and saying to me, "Look around, because all of these people are locked up." And I said, "We're all locked up." And he said, "No, we're not." And the people in there that were strung out is the people he was talking about. And I'd rather be in prison sober than on the street strung out. I really would. So yeah, the freedom comes in a lot of ways, but yeah, I'm happy as hell to be out and sober.
Yeah. Freedom is everything. Enjoy it. Shelby Taylor. I read boxers can't swim, deep chested and no webbing between the toes. So they do sink. Ethel would makes Michael Phelps look like me. Ethel would destroy Michael Phelps, and then she would lick his face with her giant 13-inch tongue just to embarrass and humiliate him. So Michael Phelps, you're watching this show, you might have won 97 gold medals, but you would never, ever beat Ethel in a pool. Ever.
You heard it.
Guarantee you that. Scott Duffy, starting to lose my mind. I don't want to get emotional here in the last couple of moments of this show, but you're the man who put a lot of people away. You did yeoman's work as an FBI agent. You served your nation, but now you're on a panel with a man who did bad things. You investigated bank robberies. You put bank robbers away. What do you think about the fact that Tommy Scoville has? And by the way, Tommy's brother. What's the name of the show?
My brother's show?
Yeah.
Chase the Heat. Chase the Heat.
Yeah, Scott, I don't know if you know this, but Tommy's brother's famous reality show star. He does not hang out with Diddy, but he eats incredibly hot food, hot peppers, and he has a reality show about this. What's it on? TLC or something?
No,
Bravo?
it was on the reality show was on Hulu. It was where the reality show was on. It's called Super Hots was the name of the reality show. He's actually done a couple of reality shows. My brother's kind of famous.
And by the way, Tommy was kind enough to send some hot peppers to the COE's dad. By the way, Space Coast and the COE and their dad are obsessed with hot food. And the COE's father, who would be my father-in-law, told me it was hot as hell. He said his eyes were tearing and he could barely handle it. So
yeah,
he handles a lot of hot food. Scott
those
Duffy, I digress for a moment. Just your final thoughts. Yeah, they did. Tommy and his bro did set. Your dad told me this last time I saw him. He said he had him, and he was. The COE's dad looks like a cute little bulldog, and his eyes welled up with tears. He said when he was eating this food. So there you go, Scott Duffy. What about the fact that Tommy Scoville was able to turn his life around, and what about his comment that freedom is the best, one of the best things that we have? You know, we're all focused on material goods here in Miami, on the next G-Wagon or Lamborghini or Cartier watch, but it's not really what life is about, Scott. What do you think of Tommy, the notion of freedom here in the United States of America, coming from a federal agent? Go ahead.
Thanks for having Tommy on with me. I miss Phil, but gosh, Tommy, it's just it's an honor, and just listening to you. And I'd like to be a student often, and so just to your wit, your wisdom, and to see where you're at now is because of the crap that you did in the past and what you've done with it to make a good life. So it is that's why everybody I sat with on the other side of an interview table, trying to get a confession, to do whatever, it is with the utmost respect, because I always hoped very, very few people went away a long time. So I knew there was going to be hope, and to see somebody like you to do what you're doing and listen to you, kudos. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. This is fun. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll do it again. If Phil misses out, I'm going to put him on notice. Now I've got Scott Duffy. This is what we call leverage in the media empire business. Leverage. But by the way, STS is going to be rolling out some new cool things this year, including me trying to go to some trials. I'm going to try to get to that Sarah Boone trial, but it's right in the middle of the Jewish holidays, and I answer to a higher authority, so I will have to see it. It is not Hebrew National, but I love these two guys. Sad that Phil was not here. I'll definitely have Scott and Tommy back on as a team. These guys were awesome. Guests, stick around. Love you, America. Check out, by the way, on Twitter, Podcast STS, Instagram, Surviving the Survivor. That's where we post our show times. We may be doing something on this Kentucky judge on Sunday night. If not, we'll see. We're doing a lot of Adelson stuff next week, once again, to recap the debacle that was this past week. Love you all. Have a great weekend.